Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey is possibly the most celebrated film in cinema, and over 50 years from its release, it remains a must-watch for any film enthusiast. But why is a film made half a century ago still the focus of such intense speculation? And more importantly, does it deserve the title of the best film ever made? Well, I believe that what makes this film so interesting is how much there is to interpret. And whilst there's plenty of themes and ideas in 2001 that make it such a great film, today I want to focus on 3 of these, which I think deserve far more attention. Firstly, Kubrick's message. Secondly, the music. And lastly, a German philosopher, Frederick Nietzsche. Bear with me on this one, because although some of these themes might not sound important, they are the reason 2001 is arguably the best film ever made. Now, if you haven't seen the film, 2001 is essentially 3 different stories, all focused around mankind. These stories take place at different points in man's evolution, though they all share a common theme. That is the discovery of an alien monolith that imparts information from which man develops technology. The first of these begins with a group of monkeys living well before the evolution of humans. They are living a normal existence until an alien monolith appears, and are endowed with a much greater intelligence. This leads them to the discovery of tools in the form of a bone club which they use to dominate other animals. Finally, the club is thrown into the air, where it transitions to a spaceship, the start of our next story. The second tale follows a group of astronauts on an expedition to the moon to find yet another one of these monoliths. When the astronauts arrive, they attempt to investigate it, only to be shocked by a high-pitched wailing that provides them with more information. That being that there is a third monolith orbiting far away in the outskirts of the solar system, just next to Jupiter. Finally, in the third and most famous sequence, a manned expedition is sent to Jupiter. However, the mission suffers a catastrophic failure after the AI that controls the ship, HAL, becomes sentient and kills all but one of the crew who manages to shut it down. This astronaut continues the mission, only to be sent for a wormhole which takes him to an alien civilization where he lives out the rest of his days. Finally, the astronaut is rebirthed as a star child, orbiting above the planet Earth. Simple, right? Yeah, I was pretty confused the first time I watched it. But the film makes a lot more sense after understanding Stanley Kubrick's message. And to do this, it's important to consider the film in the context of when it was made. By the start of the 1960s, the golden age of sci-fi had nearly run its course. Sci-fi films like Destination Moon and Forbidden Planet had fascinated Americans with their depictions of outer space, but their depictions of aliens were hardly believable, as well as being cheap references to the evils of communism. So when Kubrick pitched his idea, it was seen as just another addition to this dying franchise. But when the curtains dropped at the premiere to reveal a black screen accompanied only by an unsettling soundtrack, it was clear that this was something different. You see, Kubrick's film was so much more than the interesting, but ultimately formulaic speculation of those 50s sci-fi films. Instead of the typical plot of aliens conquering the Earth, Kubrick completely reinvented the genre. Aliens appear in no traditional form throughout the film, with their only real presence being the black monoliths they give to humans. Furthermore, instead of conquering humanity, they empowered them. But whilst we might perceive this technology as a gift to humans, Kubrick suggests otherwise. In the first sequence, we are introduced to what this gift really means. Our first clue that the monkeys have evolved is the smashing of an animal skeleton with a bone club. Furthermore, our second story begins with a transition from a bone club to a warship, orbiting the Earth in the far future. As it's made clear through this transition, the theme holding these stories together isn't just technology, but rather man's use of it for violent means. What Kubrick is suggesting here is that our humanity is tied to violence, and this technology has been so key to our evolution that our species' identity is literally based on violence. And this use of technology for violence even goes as far as to turn against us, in the form of the sentient AI, HAL. But Kubrick seems to have mixed feelings about this implication, as he spends much of the second story fixated on what he sees as man's accomplishments. And these long extended shots, with no dialogue or sound beside music, may seem boring, but they highlight the grace and beauty that humanity's technology has now achieved. Everything works in perfect synchronization, all in time to the waltz playing over the top. Speaking of waltz, one of the things that makes 2001 Space Odyssey so iconic for me is the music, and the soundtrack to the film is heavily characterized by its pre-recorded classical pieces, played by an enormous orchestra. But why classical? Wouldn't music created far in the past convey the exact opposite emotions as a film set in the far future? Well, today this might not seem so strange, as classical music has long accompanied sci-fi films, but in the 1960s and 70s, the idea of using pre-written classical music in favour of an original score was bizarre for a Hollywood blockbuster. Originally, Kubrick had commissioned Alex North, a highly regarded composer, to make the soundtrack to the film. North attempted to build on the classical pieces and give it more of a dramatic and modern punch. And the classical pieces by Richard Strauss that make 2001 so iconic were originally meant to only be placeholders. The only problem, Kubrick wasn't satisfied with anything but the originals, so instead of this, we got this. So why did Kubrick feel so strongly about these tracks? To me, I think that Kubrick felt that only these classical pieces by composers such as Strauss could capture the epic scale of these voyages. The Blue Danube is one of the most recognisable pieces of music in 2001, and for good reason. The ambiguity of the start, followed by the rhythmic structure of the waltz, represents humanity's relationship with space. The cosmos is a great mystery to us, but it's through collaboration that we might one day hope to understand it. Furthermore, I believe that the orchestra is the best way of capturing the effort of mankind that went into this voyage. The orchestra is made up of many different functioning parts, all working together for a single greater goal. It's as if these tracks are a microcosm for humanity's achievements, and in this sense the orchestra could be seen as something organic like a human body, functioning perfectly all together for one purpose. But if one track had to characterise 2001, I would have to say it's also Sprach Zarathustra. Our first introduction to this piece, also by Strauss, comes at the beginning of the film, during the dawn of man, and it is so significant because it comes to embody the core message of this film, that is the evolution of humans. But also Sprach Zarathustra isn't just significant as a musical piece, as the title is in reference to one of the most important philosophical works of the 19th century. The work in question is German philosopher Frederick Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which inspired Strauss's composition. But it appears Strauss wasn't the only one inspired by Nietzsche, and Kubrick was clearly inspired by the philosopher in 2001, in which there are a number of references to Nietzsche's work. The first of these is the connection between the story of the apes and Nietzsche's novel. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, we follow the story of the prophet Zarathustra, who descends from his home in the mountains to tell humanity that God is dead, and that he has been succeeded by his human counterpart. And this in many ways is similar to how the monolith gives the monkeys the power of technology to uplift their existence, and become gods in their own respect. But what exactly did Nietzsche mean when he said that God is dead? Well, Nietzsche wrote during a time known as the Enlightenment, in which science was quickly eclipsing the role of religion in society. And Nietzsche believed that these new discoveries had disproved the existence of God, and this would result in a loss of purpose for humanity. In place of God, humans would be forced to find new meaning. For Kubrick, this meaning comes in humanity's desire to explore space. Their journey through the cosmos represents both a physical exploration for meaning, as well as a figurative one. And space being the environment of their journey is also representative of another of Nietzsche's ideas, that being eternal reoccurrence. The idea that existence recurs in an infinite cycle is apparent in much of the film, whether it's the beginning and the end both accompanied by the same music, or the literal rebirth of man in the form of the Star Child. And it's this rebirth of man which is key to understanding the end of 2001. Kubrick showing the audience that humans have the potential to improve. It's for these reasons that I believe 2001 is possibly the best film ever made. But regardless of whether or not this is the case, its impact on science fiction and films as a whole is undeniable. And for its expert use of symbolism, music, and philosophy, it remains extremely relevant over 50 years later.